good afternoon, everyone, or still good evening. I hope you're all still awake. Yeah, I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you, Bhavna, and thank you, Dilpreet, and thank you for organizing this. Yeah, so my first slide is on. Sorry, how do you do this? This one? Oh, this one. Okay. Just to give you a little bit of a background to myself, I'm an anthropologist, and I came to work in Ladakh more than 4 decades ago. I came there to teach at a school as a young intern, and then I studied anthropology, and Ladakh became my field area. I was looking at material culture, I was looking mainly at textiles, and I was working with nomadic pastoral communities. Once I finished that, I think I wanted a reason to stay on in the place, and I saw also that things were changing there very fast. And so I went on in about sort of the late, around 1996, 1997, to set up LAMO, which is the Ladakh Arts and Media Organization. And that's the project that I'll be talking about this evening. Mainly looking at artistic practices from this area, the work we've done with young students, then sort of with older sort of young adults who have sort of gone and studied contemporary art, and then also with the older people. So we work across generations, we work with communities. Suresh had given us sort of 3 or 4 questions as pointers for this discussion, and like Sabih, I've sort of placed my presentation around that. I think one of the things I saw sort of 20 years after I'd been in Ladakh, I saw a lot of change happening. After the Kargil war especially, a lot of subsidies started coming into the region. There was a lot more tourism. The area was changing. It was also, you know, people were getting prosperous and wealthy. So a lot of old buildings were being knocked down. You know, there was no heritage policy in the area. There still isn't one. And there was this sort of mindless demolition sort of happening. I had worked in Bombay for a few years with Tasneem at Intac, and so I think I was sort of very aware of this whole practice of conservation and what was happening in the area. And it was somebody actually from the community who asked, when I had set up LAMO and knew that I was looking for a place, he asked me, well, why don't you take my old house? And this was in the old town of Leh. And the old town of Leh, which is just below the palace, which is, sorry, just to go back. Piche nahi jata. Sorry. Oops. Anyway, you can just see the old town of Leh was the palace over there, and everything below it was considered the old town of Leh. And till about sort of the late 1970s, this was very much sort of the center of Ladakh. It was a sort of political, social, economic center of this area. A lot of decisions were made here. The royal family lived here. And it was sort of the heart of the region. But when development started coming in, a lot of people started moving out. And they started moving down the road where it was much easier to get amenities like water or sanitation, drainage, because the old town is built on sheer rock. You can't bring in those kind of facilities. So in around 2003, Dr. Munshi, who owned the Munshi House, and he was the secretary, his forefathers had been the secretary to the king, he came to us and he sort of said, well, you know, I know you're looking for a place, so why don't you take my old house? And then the neighboring house, which was owned by an artisan family, said, well, why don't you take our house too? And over the last 5 years, the sort of next 5 years between sort of 2003, but we also started in 2005, till about 2009, we restored the building. Ladakh has a very short working season because of the high altitude and the cold. You can only work sort of May to September. So after we finished the restoration of the house, we then looked at a community art space. When we were restoring the house, we were very conscious of what we were putting in. We were putting in exhibition spaces, we were putting in a library, we put in a sound and editing studio, and we put in space for performance, for workshops, for presentations and all that. So it became a sort of this community art space where the Ladakhi people could come in, they could hold exhibitions, they could hold talks. It became very much a space for sort of open discussion and sort of working, art studios, artist residencies. These were just some of the images to show you some of the things that we do at the center. But just to go back a little bit at the work that we've done over the years, once we finished restoring the buildings, one of the first projects that we undertook was the neighborhood project. And we started looking at our neighborhood, because we said, we're in the old town of Leh, we must know who our neighbors are, whether it was people who lived in the royal palace or did live there, or whether it was people who lived in the adjoining buildings. We began to study the architecture of the area. We began to study, draw maps of the area, working with the local community. We began to look at archival images. We have a very large collection of digital archival images of Ladakh, beginning with some of the earliest photographs that were taken in the 1860s. We began to look at food in the area. A lot of that has been influenced by Central Asia or from Baltistan. You still have baked samosas in Ladakh, unlike the fried samosa that then came further down into Punjab. We began to look at things like water, sanitation, drainage, the sort of issues that affected the place. We also began to look at artistic responses to the area. And in 2003, we culminated the project in an exhibition. One part of this project also focused on what we called a memory wall. And we invited people from the old town to bring things into the exhibition space. And we had this in the old kitchen. So one of the other things that we also do with Lamo, and we're very conscious of, is that we're not a white cube gallery. We are using old spaces, and these date from the 17th century, especially the old winter kitchen, which is more than 400 years old. So we're very conscious of how we are also displaying things, how strong the walls are, that there are certain conditions that under which we can display things. So with this exhibition, we invited people to bring, whatever it was they wanted to bring. Some people brought in utensils, some people brought carpets, somebody brought land deeds that were signed by the king. Another person came from a family of sculptors, so she brought her grandfather's tools. And everybody wrote a little bit about why they were bringing what they were bringing into the exhibition. And it was very interesting, because when we first opened the exhibition, we actually had very, very few entries. But as people saw what it was that we were doing, the exhibition gradually grew on its own as people brought in more things. We've also looked at stories from Old Town, and we've worked with young children. In the lower left corner, the guy who's painting, very early on, he painted this sort of blob, and I asked him, well, what is it? And he said, it's a ghost. And I said, oh, you have ghost stories in Old Town? And they were like, yes, of course. And so then we worked with children to write the stories and to illustrate the stories, and then we launched our first book, which was Ghost Stories from Old Town. And then we launched another one, was My Way Back from School. And then Dungjunma, which was a graphic novel, Ladakh's first graphic novel that's done by a young artist called Jigme Thangmo. And so it's like that. We work across generations. We work with the younger generations. We try to empower them. We try to engage them. Seeing their work published, they're very, very proud of what they've done. And I think what has also happened is that over the years, a lot of these young children have attended some of our workshops, and then they've gone on to study contemporary art, or they've gone on to study museum studies, conservation studies, art history. And for us, those are, to see those students coming back is some of our, is also very satisfying. Ladakh has a very rich oral history tradition, and also a very big music tradition. So we do a lot with oral history also. We have an archive where we record stories. In Ladakh, they have stories like the Epic of Kesar, which goes on for almost 40 days. And it's interesting because it's a story about a Buddhist king, but most of the best storytellers are from the Muslim community. And so like that, we have been recording archival stories. And then this was an exhibition we had where we took a set of stories that we had from the region, and we invited the artist Tashi Namgyal to illustrate them. So we did the stories, we did the exhibition, and hopefully in the future we can put a book together on this as well. During COVID, I think one of the things, questions also that Suresh put to us was, what did you do during moments like COVID that came in? And fortunately now we have very good internet in Ladakh, which we didn't have earlier. And so we were able to use social media to invite people to have exhibitions. One of the first things we did is we invited a group of musicians to compose a song on Ladakh and sort of the beauty of the place and about sort of illness and health and how they were still living in a region that was, had very sort of clean air and was good. We did another exhibition on just looking out of your window. And the third exhibition we did was on family albums from Ladakh. Sorry. We found that a lot of people, especially young students, had come home from Delhi and Bombay and Calcutta, wherever they were studying, and they were with their families in Ladakh, and some of them were there after a very long time. So we had this exhibition where we said, well, you have family albums, why don't you take them out, look through them, and then we did a whole exhibition where people sent images and wrote about them. So even Jyoti Singh, Karan Singh's daughter, sent in an image of her father and mother with Bakula Rinpoche. In the lineup of the women, the second woman from the left started one of the first hotels in Ladakh. Then another woman wrote about the first television coming into her house. And this picture over here, the man with the chisel, I don't know, any of you know, probably most of you have heard of Vikas Dilavari, the conservation architect who worked on the Bhadaji Lad Museum with Tasneem, and that's his grandfather. So his grandfather used to come up to Ladakh to mine for mica. So it was interesting that we got images not just from people in Ladakh, but when we put the exhibition out there, we also got it from people outside the region. We've gone on to look at a lot of ecological and environmental issues in Ladakh, things like water, inviting young Ladakhis to take part in exhibitions, to talk about whether it's poetry or song or photography or visuals. And what's nice is that they have shown their work with us, but at maybe like I said, the odd workshop, and then gone on to art school. And Arunima, who we see here, is now studying at Goldsmiths. So it's a very small group of Ladakhi contemporary artists, probably no more than 10 or 15, but they've also kind of had a parallel growth with Lamo. When Lamo opened in 2010, it was when some of these young contemporary artists who had studied in Jammu or Delhi or Banaras or Shantiniketan started coming back to Ladakh. And then they began to see Lamo as a space that they could use, whether it was just to come and work or to exhibit or even just to talk. And I think that was the role that we played, and we still play that role we're only about 13 years old. So it's a very new movement in Ladakh. It's the whole artistic sort of contemporary art movement is very new. Of course, Ladakh has a very long history of art, what we see in monasteries and wall paintings and thangka paintings. That has been going on for centuries. This was another exhibition we did with young Ladakhi students, where they also curated the Heroes Project, where they talked about their heroes, and then we also invited them to curate the exhibition. So we do curation not just with sort of older Ladakhis, but we also do it with young students, so that they also then feel like they're part of the practice. And maybe they might go on and study or take it up full time or something like that. We've been studying ecologies of water in Changthang, which is this huge region that borders Ladakh and Tibet, occupied China, and where we have the Galwan war, line that some of you might have heard of. And so we work with children where we also bring them together with sort of older people from their community, so that they hear stories about water and how water has changed, or how rivers have dried up. They hear about water mills that are no longer used, or ponds that are no longer, have been abandoned. And then we take them on walks through their village, so they understand the use of water in the past, and then how things have changed into the future. And then we also do a lot of research and documentation projects, where we're also looking at traditional art forms in Ladakh. For instance, this is stupa building, and then we get older people who are documenting, like we've been documenting, like doing an inventory catalog in the region of Nubra. And they worked, they spend a few days with a stupa maker, and they learn how a stupa is made. And then we document the whole process, and then that gets written up. And like that, we are slowly documenting, putting together inventory catalog, hopefully for the whole region. We've just done one area, which is Nubra, and we've just got the funding to do Changthang now. We have started, since 2020, we started an artist in residence program. And each year we invite, it's an open call for Ladakhi artists to apply for. So over the years, we've had a furniture designer work with us. We've had somebody who works with clay and paper pulp. We had somebody who works with copper wire, and somebody who did a translation of Balti ghazals, and then we had a all women's performance. Again, the first time in Ladakh that only the three women that you see over there from the right came together and performed. Otherwise, you would never see just a female performance in the region. So I think in this way, we've been trying to sort of do whatever we can to encourage art practices in Ladakh, and to also make them more meaningful for Ladakhis, so that they also understand the culture that they come from, the communities that they come from. Sa Ladakh was our most recent exhibition in 2023. It was held in the month of August. It got quite a lot of media attention. We were part of the exhibition. We collaborated it. Vibha, who is sitting there, she also came to Ladakh, and her piece, which I don't think you can really see, but it's sort of written in fabric on the back of that mountain. You don't own me is what Vibha used, recycled fabric and put onto the mountain top. But we also had Ladakhi artists take part in this exhibition, and I think that was a very sort of credible thing, because there were international artists there. There were artists from other parts of India, and there was a group of 7 Ladakhi artists who took part in an event like this. I think giving them a voice, I think that's the most important thing that we're trying to do now is get Ladakhi artists also to come out of Ladakh, to show their work. It's a question I'm always asked. I'm always asked, is there really contemporary art from Ladakh? And I'm like, well, why not? It's something that's growing. It's something that's happening. It's a very, very new idea in Ladakh. It's only 10, 15 years old. In another 15, 20 years, it will grow. And I think that's the kind of work that we are trying to foster and grow. I also wanted to say it's, because earlier we had questions on politics and decolonization and all that. In Ladakh, we also work with challenges. We are located between 2 borders, and we have to always be very mindful of some of the things that we say. We have a lot of security forces around the place who come and scrutinize every single exhibition that we hold, and everything that we, a lot of what we speak and say. Ladakh is now a union territory. Article 370 was abolished. So there are a lot of challenges also to working in this region, but there's a lot of hope in the future also. Thank you.